Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
In this episode, terrain for your games. Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
And we're going to be talking about terrain in your RPG games.
We have some right here.
Right. So I'm a big proponent for terrain in RPG games.
Yeah, I am too. I love it.
Whether you're doing it on a TV on a board or three-dimensional like this all is.
Yep.
And this stuff is stuff you can get on the cheap, really.
Well, a lot of it comes from like model railroad stuff, and you could buy a lot of the grass, the trees, and things like that, you know, and it ends up being roughly the right kind of scale.
Right, and you can use just thin board for the base for your trees, which is what we did.
Yeah.
Or some people don't even do that. They just put the trees on a big metal base and plop them down so they got more stability.
Yeah. How did you get into building terrain?
I tried to do it for models eons ago, but I wasn't very good at it. I still don't think I'm very good at it. These trees were actually made for Flames of War, which was a World War II miniature 15 millimeter World War II game.
Yeah.
And we built it for playing Flames of War. Same with the hills we got for that.
Right.
And we just thought, well, we're not playing Flames of War anymore. Let's use it for our Pathfinder game or our RPGs.
Yeah. I got into terrain because, one, I love landscape. I love maps, landscapes, landscape painting. I love all that stuff, landscape photography. But I tried to build dioramas for models too. When I grew up, kids were really still fascinating with raiding the model shop and building models and building dioramas for the models, whether it was set in World War II or whether it was set in Vietnam or Korea or even World War I. And we got down to building like little bunkers out of wood or trees or sand for desert, all sorts of things. You know, the miniaturized diorama stuff is just really fascinating. And both of us had a chance to go to museums and see the battleground things that people have set up in museums.
Or train displays.
Or train displays, train tracks and stuff and train dioramas. And I just love the miniaturization and the quality and the detail that goes into it.
And really thinking back, I think my first was for a train I had. I got a train. I love trains. Trains are cool.
Yep.
Girls can love trains.
Sure they can.
And
why not?
I had a big Tyco train, and I had a board, and I had buildings and stuff, and I wanted to lay it all out and make a display. And
yeah, why not? I mean,
little HO scale car, or the Matchbox cars you put in there and play around with it and play. You have your train going around, and you got your cars, playing cars and whatever else.
For me, terrain enhances a game. Okay,
right.
What we have right here is your typical kind of setup of a camp. Camp in the forest, camp in the woods, things are happening. You've got tents, sleeping bags, you have a fire that's burning. You have your adventurers, and some of your adventurers would be asleep in the tents, and you'd have some of the adventurers out on watch. We've just kind of got them all standing up. And of course, then you've got your antagonist that shows up, your little dragon, or your yeti, or your beholder, or something that comes out of the woods and harasses your adventurers at night. It's just really cool to be able to set up a scenario so people can place their minds into it, rather than you just have a piece of paper and you're like, okay, here's your camp, and then this thing shows up, and you're like, oh, okay. And you have to try to imagine. Now, there's nothing wrong with just imagining something straight out of your visual cortex, with a blank piece of paper. Nothing wrong with that. But a lot of people who think 3D like this, think tangibility, you can touch it and that kind of stuff. That's why figures work so well with the game. It's because it's 3D, it's tangible. It gives you a chance to express your creativity. And then there you can set up a diorama.
Right. And the part that carries on also into terrain is basing your miniatures. If you use miniatures, putting a nice base on it. I also do BattleTech mech wire, and so putting basing on your mech,
Yeah,
so it's not just the mech on this black base.
Yeah, it adds a little flair to it.
Adds a little flair, and brings it a little bit more to life. So this gives more life to the game. You can lay out trees, and you can say this is kind of what you see, and you got hills, and now your party is getting a dimension. When I first started playing games, we didn't use terrain. Somebody would say you walk down a 20-foot hallway that's 5 foot wide, and you enter into a room that's 30 by 30, and you've got beds and whatever else in it. It was all visual, and then you were drawing it out on a piece of hex paper, and it may or may not be right.
Right.
And then we moved on to the next part of terrain that we had was, I think it might have been the original, what used to be what became Wizards of the Town, or Wizards of the Coast, not Wizards of the Coast, Games Workshop. Excuse me. They had this cardboard terrain, and we started putting it on the particle board. So we had rooms that we could throw down, and we have our figures. So we actually had more for our dungeons. We could say it was a 30-foot by room and actually throw out a 30-foot room with a 10-foot or 5-foot hallway and a door and whatever else.
Sure.
And then things moved on the cheap, and that was actually pretty cheap because, like I said, we would take this cardboard and we would glue it onto this 1/4-inch MDF board, and that way it had stability to it.
Yeah.
And we had a huge box of it. Now the guy that had it, I bought a bunch, and he'd bought some, and he had it all because we gamed at his place, and he ended up running it off with it, so I lost all that. So then we moved to these mats, drawing it out on the mats.
Flexible mats, yeah.
So it was the first start of our terrain, and we'll show you other parts of our terrain here in just a moment.
This is a good place to start. Okay, it's just basic. You've got little movable things that you move around. All right, you've got trees. Oops, that tree's getting a little loose in there. So you can move these pieces around to create a different kind of forest scenario. You can turn them. You have hillsides right here. You have your accoutrements for the camp with the tents, sleeping bag, fire, that sort of thing. This is very basic, but it can really enhance what you're doing if you can build terrains like desert terrain. These could be sand dunes, okay, or they could be snow-covered hills. Now, if you've seen some of the first episodes that we made, where we made the stone circle, the hinges, we put a lot into our terrain. We like to really build it, do a good job. So that's one of the things that we worked on. The original Wizards of the Tower is we worked on the hinge, the stone hinge setup for a campaign we're still in. And this is just a basic way to start. You can still have combat. You can move your people, into the trees so they can provide cover. And so it provides kind of a realistic line of sight to where you're trying to work your combat out. And it doesn't have to get as complex as this, but it sure can, and it can be even more complex than this.
Right. You can draw out your trees on this. One of our first thing of trees was somebody printed out some 2x2 and 4x4 paper trees that we could just throw down and say, "There's the trees."
Yeah, but come on, this is 3D.
I like having dimension into a game.
I do too. I love 3D dimension into a game. It just makes it more realistic, and I love it.
Yeah, that way, as a dungeon master, I can say, you're in a forest, and you throw out these trees, and you put the group in it, and you can throw your monsters out there, and they can start to visualize what they're seeing.
Yeah, a monster. Okay, you can't really make the monster out. It's still on the other side of the trees, but it's making its way towards you.
And you can hear it, and you can see some glowing eyes.
Yeah, through the trees. It's like, oh, well, then it's just like a forest, So that's kind of cool. Yeah. So we're going to move on to another piece of terrain.
And now, we've got dungeon terrain.
Dungeon terrain, yeah.
So these are 3 different kinds of dungeon terrain that we have in our collection.
Yeah.
Some we use more than others. Now, this is Dwarven Forge. Dwarven Forge is some of the nicest looking stuff, but it is very expensive.
Yeah, and a little limited too, to be honest. There's things that you can do with it, but like we were talking about before, you can't always put in the right kind of doors or the right kind of things to fit into it. So
they have those things now, but it's very expensive.
Yeah.
To get a starter set for Dwarven Forge is almost $200.
Wow.
And that's not a very big setup.
Yeah.
So it's very expensive, but it's beautiful stuff. Now this one, the door actually opens and only goes one way,
Well, you know, that's
and
okay.
it's scaled decent, and it's very sturdy. So you could drop
Yeah.
it. You can get the stuff unpainted and paint it yourself. It's a little bit cheaper to do that. And they have towns, and they have castles, and they have outdoor stuff and dungeons and caverns. But it's nice stuff.
Yeah. I like Dwarven Forge because of its tactile stone sense. It looks like a dungeon. All the stone walls, stone floors.
Yeah.
It looks like a dungeon. And I know you put a lot of money into it, but to me, authenticity and maybe a sense of realism goes an awful long way. I would probably have something like this and have little LED lanterns and little torches.
And you can get stuff like that
flickering.
now.
They never used to have any of that,
No.
but now you can.
This is one of the original sets. I got this off of a friend of mine who was cleaning out his storage shed and was just trying to get rid of everything. And he was just going to throw it away. And I'm like, don't you dare. And I think I gave him $40 or $80. I'm like, what do you want for it? He's like, $40. I'm like, here you go. And I
Yeah.
got 4 boxes of stuff. And it's not a ton of stuff, but it's still...
There's quite a bit there. There's quite a bit there in the box. There's
you
a
can make
lot
a few
there.
things with it.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. I fell in love with it just because of its authentic look. You know, all the stones,
Yeah.
the fitted stones, the doors. You know, the doors look like they're made out of heavy wood. You know, it just looks authentic, and I kind of like it.
Yeah, now this is an older setup. The newer setup, you can actually use magnets. This older setup, you have these butterfly,
Yeah, butterfly clips.
which, you know, it's okay for if it's on the ground, but if you're trying to set it up real quickly, it does take time.
Yeah.
It's slow.
Yeah. Okay.
And we haven't used it that much for our games. But
We haven't, but I've always asked you, why don't we set it up? And I know you don't like to do that because it doesn't seem to be that flexible.
Yeah.
But to me, it's really cool.
Well, remember, I did have one dungeon that I set it all up with, and I was using everything that we've got here, which we'll talk about towards
Yeah.
the end, the
Yeah.
dungeon. So then this next piece that we have, this is Dungeons and Lasers.
Okay, Dungeons and
Dungeon
Lasers.
Lasers, I have a love-hate with Dungeons and Lasers. We have a ton of Dungeons and Laser stuff.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It comes across as really cool. You have different themes, you know, whether it be Dwarven or the Necromancer or the
Yeah.
Sorcerer.
Yeah.
You have to paint this stuff up. You have to take it off of the tree like the old model, and it's sturdy, so it's hard to get off. You have to
Yeah.
use clippers and clean it up. It's really cool stuff, but it doesn't stay together very well. You have to, if you were going to do your dungeon, it's not something that you're going to throw together and then say, okay, here's your room. You actually have to have this stuff built and sitting on the table. Same with Dwarven Forge.
Yeah.
You have to have it sitting on the table.
Now, does this door open?
No, it's hard set plastic.
Okay.
They do have doors that open. We have some of those. I think there's 4, 8, something like that. I can't remember how many we have. We just never popped them out and put them together.
Okay.
These are just hard set in, and you know, while it works, it's just not the greatest.
No, I can see that. You know, there's a level of detail. If you look at the floors and stuff, look really good.
Yeah.
There's a level of sameness to it too, though.
Yeah. Now each piece is two-sided.
Okay.
So while one side
You can flip it around.
Yeah, you can flip it around. It has an arch, and the other side is a plain wall. So this side we have an arch. This side is a plain wall.
Okay.
So you do have a little bit of variety, so you can change things around if you want.
Okay. I also see like there's little cutouts and stuff, so you could put
Right.
torches in the walls if you wanted,
or plug the holes or other
plug the
things,
holes
shields and whatever else they have. Little
shields.
Things that you
I
can
know
add
there's
in.
little gargoyle heads too that you
Yes.
can stick up in there.
Yep.
So there is some variety and stuff that you can use to decorate it.
Right. This was a Kickstarter that we did,
Okay.
like 3 different Kickstarters, and they've done a lot more, which is mainly miniatures now that they're getting into.
Okay.
They've gotten more into that instead of so much of the dungeons. They moved into towns and a castle, and there's sewers that we have.
Oh, we do have some
Yeah,
sewer
with
stuff.
some clear water. We've
Yeah.
just never done any of that.
Yeah.
Popped it out, which is kind of, if we ever do sewer adventures, we'll have to pop it out and get
Man,
some of
there's
it
so
painted.
much. I know we've got box after box after box of stuff like that up there. that we've never really gone through. You got to clip it all from the sprue. You got to trim it.
You got to prime it.
You got to prime it.
And then you got to paint it.
Put it together. I mean, it's not bad. It's a labor of love, to be honest. But man, you got to really want to put together a dungeon to use it. You know, whereas the Dwarven Forge stuff comes already ready to go. The Dungeons and Lasers is going to take a lot of prep.
Yeah. This is a lot cheaper than this.
Yeah.
A lot cheaper than this.
Yeah. And of course, this is just sprue molded plastic, whereas this is like resin, heavy resin, and it's real heavy.
Yeah. The third part that we have is this is an old WizKids Mage Knight dungeon that I bought. And this is cool because you've got the doors. The doors actually will open on it, and we use this a ton because it goes together so quick. It's just a matter of snapping the pieces, which come in 10 by 10 section, and you just pop it together. And then if you want the walls, you just slap the walls down in, and it holds together pretty nice. So you can pick this up.
Yeah, we do use that a lot.
We use this a lot.
The way it locks together with these tension keys.
Yep.
You can pick them up, you can move them around, you can slide them around. You know, and then look, it's okay. I mean, the floor, you know, it's got holes in it and stuff for putting walls.
Yeah, that's for the walls in case you want to do the walls.
You know, there's gaps and things, but the doors work, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and you've got a wooden door here, and then there's a metal door here.
Yeah.
So there you go. So you know the doors open, and they will open both directions fully, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we've used these a ton. Now the Mage Knight stuff isn't made anymore. Now they have WizKids has done other dungeon stuff which looks pretty cool, and it's far cheaper that you can buy.
So let me ask you this about the Mage Knight. We got a lot of it.
Well, we've got 2 boxes like this, which were basically the floors. That's all they were.
Okay.
And then we got this box here, which is the whole kit. This has walls, doors, and floors in it.
So floors in here, and walls and doors in here.
And floors.
And floors.
Yeah, this was the complete kit, and this was just an expansion.
Okay.
You can find this stuff on eBay. It's kind of expensive. We have 2 boxes of these, 2 boxes of these. So this actually makes a pretty good sized dungeon for us. We've made some pretty good sized stuff.
There's a lot of floors in there.
Yeah, now between the 3, there was one dungeon that I created for our current campaign that I had to use all 3 pieces to do it.
Yeah.
And I set it all out pretty much on this table here that we use before the game, and then I had to carry it on over because I didn't want the players to just sit down and see it.
Right, I remember that, yep.
A lot of times you have to cover things up if you don't want your party to see it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is there's nothing wrong with setting up beforehand and moving it over. How do you reveal it to your party? That's the question. Yeah, you know, do you like fold the sheet back slowly? I mean, that's kind of cool. You could do it that way. Or you can have it like parts of it are dark and then you light them up as they go, that kind of thing. I
see people take like other pieces of paper or cardboard and throw it over and then they just pull it off as they need to.
Now, one of the things we see a lot now is kind of like electronic dungeon stuff that you have a screen and you show, which is like Tailspire. Right?
Tailspire, there's Minoir, which is coming out. There's Dungeon Alchemist. There's a few other ones, and I'll put the links up there that you can throw up on a screen, or you can do it if you've got the built-in TV screen, gaming table, or you've built. I've actually thought, go out, let's spend $100 on a 43 by 40, 43-inch LED TV and build a thing and hook it up to the computer and then have it and people can see it, the dungeon from the top down, which is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool, but it sort of gets past the idea of having 3D terrain.
Right.
And that's kind of what we wanted to talk about here, is why we still like to do 3D terrain. Because it's tangible. Okay? Because you can play with the doors. Because you can move people.
Okay, so you see it, you have a 10-foot wide hallway and there's a door at the end. Okay, we're opening up the door. What do we see? Well, in it is a beholder. Yeah, well,
of course, it'd be in a bigger room than that. If it was jamming itself in a little room like that, it'd be one mad beholder. But there could be a sorcerer in there waiting for you, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it's always kind of cool to imagine that you're in this little room and you got to fight it out with somebody.
Yeah.
And if you like models and building models, and it seems like because of the 3D printing craze now, people are really getting back into model making and building stuff.
Yeah, and
and modeling different pieces of artwork and terrain and fixtures and all kind of stuff. I applaud that. I think it's cool, and I'm glad that people are doing it. They're becoming more crafty and handicrafty and creative. Human beings are naturally creative people. They, they want to build things, they want to make things, and we're all very inventive. This kind of plays into your imagination. It's like, I can see myself in there. What am I doing and where am I going? That kind of stuff. And it's really, really cool, So I think that's why 3D terrain enhances anything.
And we actually have a ton of 3D files for dungeons and stuff. We just haven't ever printed it out. Our printer at the time, when we had all that, just kind of got cranky on us, and we were doing other 3D things, and I haven't just ever got into printing it. We did some village stuff, which we'll be showing here in just a second. And but anyway, we're gonna take this away here, so just a moment, and we'll have the other stuff. And now, with the wonders of magic, we have a castle wall.
And a gatehouse, which would be right there.
This is all 3D printed.
So this is 3D printed from files, right?
Right. This is from printed scenery.
Okay, really cool. I love this stuff. As soon as we started making it, I was like, this is so cool.
And we've got far more parts that we need to print out for this. More walls and... Once again, we had a printer that was getting cranky when I was printing this, so time to return to it.
But, here's the thing. We've got enough right here for a castle defense. We've got 2 guard towers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels, essentially. One down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this would be the top level.
Right.
And then you've got your walls, which is 1, 2.5, or 2 or 3 walls. And you can take them off, and they've got... parts that go down, in each one, and there's
a trap door which there's a trap door.
That's okay. It still goes down from one to the other though, which is cool.
And it just all puts together really easily.
And we've got our characters here moving along the wall, and of course we have a Yeti trying to get in. Why a Yeti would want to get in there, I have no idea.
The gates open.
Yep.
And crushes the Yeti.
Okay. From this side, which you can't really see, there are windows and little passages that you can go in and out. But you can see there's passages here, arrow slits, and of course the inside.
Doors to inside.
The inside is hollow so that you can see lights and stuff from the inside, which is really kind of cool. And you can see.
Pull out the magical wand here.
That you can see lighting. So if you had little torchlight things in there, that would be kind of neat. That you could see things happening in that sense. So, there's a lot to it that you can create with something like this. As soon as Delaney started making this, I was like, oh, this is so awesome. It is really awesome. It's also really difficult to clean up if you don't have good prints. There's a lot of fur and shag and stuff hanging off it that you've got to clean off, hairs and things, and then you got to start painting it. So you can see that we started painting part of this, and we wanted to paint a castle that was different from your typical gray stone European medieval castle. We wanted to paint more of a medieval sort of Middle East, maybe southern Spanish castle that had a different sort of culture to it. So we were going to start painting it in earth tones. Which would work really cool for a desert campaign that we kind of had working on at the time. So, you can take them apart. You can have your adventures move from level to level, room for room, and you can have the antagonists moving with them and fighting. And there's just a lot of things you can do to enhance what's going on with this.
As you can see, this is kind of the half circle type. Now, this particular set, there are square and there are round, and then we've even got some that are bigger round that we can make like a big round tower.
Wow.
We've never painted, which we're going to be doing sometime soon.
If you on these, you can see where the walls keep going, and there's doors right here,
and there's locks. There's the dragon locks, or the
and they go together with these little locks that lock them into place.
Kind of U-shaped, kind of like the spaceship that we were talking about.
Same kind of double horseshoe kind of locks. It's made basically to build an enormous... I imagine there's a file for a corner tower, right? Because these are side towers.
Well, there are circle towers, and then there are square towers.
Okay, so ones where you would have a corner of a wall coming off, right?
You can, you can make the elbow, I think.
Yeah.
I think there are some for that.
Yeah, they would have to be, because if you're going to build a whole castle.
Yeah.
I would love to have a whole castle so that we could do a castle siege kind of thing. And it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. But it's also really cool.
Yeah.
You know, that's fantasy right there. That's high fantasy, folks. You know, everything from, you know, Tolkien to, you know,
Brooks and
you know,
Salvador.
Ari Salvatore and all the fantasy.
Yeah.
They always have castles. They always have castles and towers. And even the title of our show, Wizards of the Tower, is all about a tower. You know,
Right.
being out in a magical realm of a wizard living in a tower. So creating terrain like this is just really awesome. It's a lot of work. You can buy stuff like this, obviously, from people now who 3D
Right.
print it and sell it, or you can 3D print it yourself.
Cheaper to buy a 3D printer yourself because you can get a good 3D printer for under $200.
Yeah.
It's just learning how to finagle with it
And get it to work right.
and get it to work. And then you spend $24 on a roll of PLA, which will probably give you a full tower, maybe a little bit more. So it's going to be expensive, but it's not as expensive as buying it, because if you were to buy this from somebody on Etsy, you're going to pay a couple $100.
If even. I mean, a painted version of that would be even more.
Yeah.
Because they would charge you a ton of paint to paint it. I know this was sort of like a lot of hard work and stuff like that, but do you feel like this is the way that you could work on something and create like a really good...
Oh, yeah, I have intentions of finishing this just like the spaceship, and then having an actual castle for an adventure. Even for city, you put this out and you've got your village, and you've got you just got this whole thing for your players. They come up to the gates, here's the gates, and and there's the guard who speaks down, why do you come to Corinthian?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Well, we're here to trade, good sir. But where are your papers?
Yeah.
Show us your papers. And now the party's like, okay, now we got to sneak in.
Yeah. That's you could even build a village out on the outskirts of it and have someone traveling through a village to the local castle or the Lord's Keep or whatever.
Which reminds me, and now a village has appeared.
Right outside the castle gates, you've got a village. You've got some pretty good-sized houses, probably belonging to the richer people in the village, and then a medium-sized house, and then some peasant huts.
Yep.
These are 3D printed too.
Yes, and these roofs come off.
Roofs come off. You got the attic up there for doing various things in the attic for role-playing up there for combat. Some of them don't fit together the best.
They fit together. Yeah, it's just a matter of
trying to get back into their spots.
There you go. And then they're held together by pegs.
Yeah, which is pretty good. I mean, most things are kind of pegged together. So, just like the towers, you can move from floor to floor, level to level, or room to room in these 3D printed huts. And some of them are just kind of for show, which I don't think there's much in this guy, but these things definitely have some levels.
This one is one level. This thing was a pain in the rear to print.
Yeah, you can
because
tell.
it was it was more than that.
Yeah.
It was a bunch of pieces. It's hollow. Now you could put a floor on the bottom of it and put something in it. And then this was all a couple different pieces that printed out. It printed out like this. So this was on the bed. And then you had this little anchor piece, so you had to put it together. So it was kind of a pain.
Well, I mean,
to glue together.
That one isn't so much for playing inside it because it doesn't have the floors. Right. So it's more like dressing. It's more terrain standard kind of thing. Whereas the castles, of course, you can take the layers off and have your adventures moving up. And same with the houses. Now you can see, these houses we haven't really done a lot to. We haven't really painted them up much. It's a lot of work, and you got to prime them, then paint them, and then kind of put details on. It's not something that you can't do. It's just that it takes a lot of time.
Right.
And if you don't have a lot of time, or if you're working towards something, it's
Or if you have work.
you work, life gets in the way. You've got to dedicate your time to this. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying you've got to dedicate your time to it because you're going to be busy.
Yeah. Now, painting isn't always a requirement, but it gives you a little bit more enhancement.
Yeah. I mean, you really should paint it, if you're going to do it. Just to individualize it and make it look good.
Yeah.
And
we've got, the 3D printed well, which we've actually used in the game.
We have. Yeah, there was a campaign where we had a haunted well.
Yeah, we've got a couple of the wagons, which, you can take the cage off.
You got a little cage wagon with a prisoner in there, and you got some horses that go with it.
Those were actually other miniatures that we used for it. Which we bought a bunch of draft horses just for that purpose.
They're about the right size. It looks like they fit.
Yeah.
Adding a little accoutrements to it, like the well, like the horses, like the wagon, it gives it this little stamp of authenticity that you have stuff kind of piled in there, kind of making it look like a real medieval village.
Yeah.
Built on the outskirts of a castle, where typically a lot of times people built villages around the castle so they could tend to the needs of those who lived and worked in the castle.
Or be protected when they were attacked.
And be protected when they attacked, so they could run into the castle and hide, while they're being attacked by some invaders of some sort. So
this is the external or internal part of the castle.
Yeah.
You could use it internal or external, however you wanted, but just kind of fun little stuff to have.
You could even have, you could take the buildings and put them back behind the walls for a fortified town. I mean, a lot of towns in Europe had castle walls around them to protect the whole town, from stuff from attack. So you could definitely do that. With terrain that goes from place to place and moves around, it's very flexible. You don't just have to draw it out on a piece of paper and say, okay, this is the town, this is the walls, there's some buildings. It really enhances it if you have a nice, good-sized table like this and you can put a lot of stuff down. I think it really helps with the game so people can visualize what's going on.
Yeah, whether you're doing a sci-fi game, you can do sci-fi terrain or even sci-fi buildings, or you're doing fantasy, which we got here, or you do Old West. Do you want to show the Old West stuff?
Yeah, let's do that because that's our next step.
Drizzle, 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 drone. And now we have an Old West village.
Yeah. I love Westerns.
Westerns are part, if you live in Western United States, Westerns are part of what we grew up with. And it's part of our folklore.
Growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, growing up on a ranch in the upper Midwest, the Old West wasn't that far behind, to be honest with you. I love Westerns, and we managed to print some really nice printed terrain for Westerns.
This is all from printed scenery.
Really cool. Let's talk about the buildings we have here. What's this one?
So that's the General Store Mercantile.
General Store Mercantile. Of course, you got your wagon in front, and it's got some barrels, some goodies. What's this?
This is the hotel, I believe.
Okay, it's a hotel.
Or saloon.
Okay, what's this then?
That could be one of these is a bank, I believe.
Okay.
And one of them is a saloon.
All right. So either one, they could kind of fit. We haven't really decorated them that much to get it. Okay, there's an outhouse right here, which is cool.
Yeah, the old miner shed.
What's this right there?
It's an old miner shed.
Old miner shed, like an assay office or something?
Yeah, or you could use it as the livery stable.
Okay.
If you wanted. And then you have the sheriff's office.
And you got the sheriff's office. Okay. And you've got some 3D printed figures. You've got some vaqueros here. Got some townies. Got some gunfighters.
Somebody up on the roof.
Got a guy up on the roof. Got a guy on horseback. If you're going to do an Old West game, I really got to say you got to have something.
You got to have 3D terrain.
You got to have some kind of terrain because it's so iconic in the Western mindset, even in Europeans who love Westerns.
Yeah.
United States, Canada, wherever, you're going to have a backdrop for your game. If you're trying to do like a boot hill or something like that with pen and paper, I think everybody's going to be sitting there like, well, I'm trying to picture Bonanza here with a town and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, whatever. It's just not going to work. You're going to have something, okay, to enhance it, to give it character.
Or if you even want to do a miniatures game, because there are a few Old West miniatures games out there which kind of get into a little bit of role playing.
Like what?
what is it? Gunfighter's Ball, I think, is one. There's a bunch of different ones.
Okay.
Of course, if you're into Red Dead Redemption, then this just kind of gives you more visuality and role play.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of on a computer, you're doing it on pen and paper.
Yeah. One thing you could do is, of course, this is sort of like your typical Western town. Front porches, false fronts. But if you wanted, you could 3D print like a bunch of adobes and have like a South or Southwest or Mexican village.
Yeah.
And still do a Old West kind of thing or a archaic sort of background. So you could do a lot of stuff like that. Or you could do a whole bunch of miners' shacks and have like an Old West thing set in like miners' towns.
Or tents.
Or tents even, like a miner camp, like a boom town. So you could even do something like that. You could even do like an Old West river port with like a river boat or something like that. I mean, there's just endless possibilities, especially when you do 3D stuff. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
Now, one of the first buildings I've ever saw that could work for something like this is my brother, when he had his train set partly set up, he had an old depot. And it was the most fascinating thing how the depot was constructed. It had a little freight area where you could roll the freight wagons up. It had windows and doors. And it was HO scale, so it was about this big. I don't know where that thing ever went, but it was just really amazing detail, and I used to just be so fascinated with it. You know, like I said, when I was a kid, you could still go into these old towns out west in Montana and North Dakota and still see the old brick buildings, the old wooden buildings that had been there for 100 years. I mean, you know, hitching posts were still there.
Well, if you go
outhouses were still there.
If you go to Tombstone, you can go to old Tombstone.
Yeah, well, that's a movie set, but they still had older towns. Right. There's towns in Colorado where the buildings are really wide. The main streets are really wide, and everybody's like, why is that? It's like, it's wide enough so you could turn a wagon around in it.
Yeah.
And that's why they're so wide.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of cultural references here.
Now, of course, you don't have to 3D print. You can make the stuff all as you want. Any of it, you know, from all of our fantasy terrain to the Old West terrain to sci-fi terrain, you can make all this stuff with foam,
cardboard, printed wood. There's these companies that do like little wooden slats, right,
MDF.
where they laser burn. They laser burn shapes into it.
And we've seen some of those at one of our local hobby stores, which had an Old West building. It's like, wow, I'd like to buy more of that because I want more buildings for an Old West for an Old West game, which we've played, which we'll be talking about here.
We've got a few here. Well, you'd have to print a few more buildings, but this isn't almost enough if you laid it out for a main street. You know, we've got it set up in a circle, which is kind of odd, but it's so that, you know, you can see what each building is. But when we've had it set up before, we've had it set up for Main Street.
Now, as you can see, there was somebody inside.
Yep.
So you can see they come apart.
Yeah. This is the saloon because you can see the batwing doors.
Yep.
Yeah. And you've got layers, staircases. There's a staircase coming up right here that you've got a staircase to come up to the balcony. So there's stuff like that, you know. Different layers that you can, if you're doing a saloon fight, you can fight your way up layers and coming up, you know, from story to story up onto the balcony. You can shoot off the balcony down into the street. All that kind of stuff. It's just really cool. You've got a guy up here, you know, taking cover behind the false front. Is it absolutely necessary to have something, you know, like this? Is it absolutely necessary to have terrain? No, but it really enhances your storyline and your game if you've got some kind of 3D reference. Yeah. It just really does.
So there's a guy, and I think he might be in New York, and Professor Dungeon Master did a thing with him that the guy had all this terrain that he built, this dungeon, and people could come and play, and it was his goal to make a safe space for people to come in and game and use his terrain in his building, his little shop.
I like that.
Yeah, that was so cool. I
like that.
I love that episode. That was such a cool episode.
Yeah, that's nice for someone to create like a safe space for everybody to come in and play at.
Yeah, and use his terrain and miniatures and everything else.
Yeah, that's really, really cool and very nice of someone to do that. That's a business opportunity in a way. You know, we've kind of had places like that where we've had gaming rooms that were going to be bars and pubs that kind of, but it all kind of falls through just because a lot of people are into stuff like that for greed. They just want to line their pocketbooks. They don't care about the interior. They don't care about the people who show up. They don't care about the clientele. They just want to get rich quick so they can get out of town and go, go live in the Bahamas.
Yeah. Now, of course, some of your gaming stores have, Warhammer, and they have some terrain, or sometimes a lot of times people will bring in their own terrain for that to set up their board. I know for BattleTech we do that. We 3D printed buildings, and so there's a bunch of us who have buildings and forests and mountains and stuff that we put together. And it does take a spot to store all this stuff, where you can store it in crates and up on bookshelves or wherever else. But this stuff is really cool.
Yeah,
I really love the terrain.
Yeah.
Because to me, it just enhances the game. And I can speak for our players. I'm pretty sure that when we throw out the three-dimensional stuff, they're like, wow, this adds so much more dimension, and I can see where I'm at.
Oh, yeah. It gives you a great visual reference, what you're doing. As someone comes around the corner, as someone's up on the roof, as someone's on the balcony, as someone's on the porch, it gives you a great 3D reference for your game.
Yep.
Whether you want to do it with forests, whether you want to do it with castles, whether you want to do it with dungeons, you want to do it with a village, you want to do it with buildings, whatever you want to do. I would recommend that if you're thinking of trying to put together some kind of a game, try to get some terrain to try to enhance it a little bit.
Yeah.
Try to, because it holds people's interest. We like looking at stuff. We like looking at little models and things like that. It just is kind of cool.
Tangible. When somebody brings in their miniature and they've painted it, you're like, wow, that's, you did a really cool job on, painting that miniature. And that'll have to be a future episode, miniatures that we have. Yeah, whether it be ones that we, printed, or plastic ones we bought, or whatever.
We can definitely do one of those, because we don't want to get too much into like painting miniatures, because that's a whole new series of things. But you can see, like, some of our Vaqueros are painted really cool. Delaney did a great job with these Vaqueros. They really did. And they look really cool. And it really enhances, it brings color and character. The only thing better would be if we wanted to 3D print some horse poo, and like have some horse poo here, maybe a puddle that you fall into, definitely the watering trough, a couple hay bales, that kind of stuff, so...
Very fun stuff. So anyway, I think we're going to end this long episode of Wizards of the Tower.
Yeah, role play.
And we hope you've enjoyed our visualization of terrain and terrain that you can use, and ideas that maybe you'll get out of this for terrain. If you use terrain for your games, let us know. We'd like to hear about what you do. And if you've got photos, please send us your photos.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Or post your photos, or whatever. We'll figure out something. So anyway...
Don't forget to
like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, comment. We make sure that we make a reply to every comment that you have. And anyway, we're not in this for money. We're in this for having fun.
This is a passion project. So thanks for your attention.
Thanks, and may all your adventures be epic.
And keep on rolling.